questions and send an answer to all of you with all the information after the event as well. So while we're waiting for any minute now, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. We would like the panelists to also see who's in the room with us today. And I can see there's so many of you in the webinar session today. Thank you so much for joining us. And welcome Professor Uli from Bangkok University, the School of Entrepreneurship. Great to see you. Hi, Callum, joining us from Yunus, Thailand. Good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to use the chat box to write your name and your organization. And we're joined today with a great group of panelists and presenters, and we'll start in just 1 or 2 minutes. I see Kun Poon as well joining us from Thailand Professional Qualification Institute. Great to see you. Thank you for joining. Hi, Colin from Social Enterprise Northern Ireland. Very early for you. Thank you for joining from Ireland. We also have some presenters joining us today from Washington, D.C. and also from England. So we have a great group here. Welcome, Kun Gop from tejai.com. Fred Evans from Thammasat University, welcome. I can see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones as well. So it's great to have all of you here joining us. Our session today will be live on Facebook as well. So you could also go back and visit our Facebook page, both from ESSI Thailand and ANDE Facebook page afterwards as well. Great. So one more time before we start, please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself with your name and organization. We would like to see who you are and where you're joining us from. And there's a Q&A box that you could use to put down any question you have about the presentation, the question you have for the panelists, and we will compile it and make sure that you get your answer as well. Great. So I think it's now time, 3 o'clock, and we would like to start this session today. Welcome everybody. Today's event is a jointly collaborated effort between many of impact ecosystem builders in Thailand. We're co-launching 2 reports today that will provide insights into the current state of social enterprise in Thailand and the snapshot of support available for entrepreneurs in Bangkok. So to start us off, we want to get a sense of who are in the room. And if you could just take 1 minute on your screen to answer the poll that appeared on your screen right now. We have just 2 questions for you today. If you could just help to identify the types of organizations that you're representing. Have many different types of organizations joining us today, as you can see from the chat box. So that we get a sense of who we have in the session today. You can see a poll box appear on your screen. And if you could just click on the type of organization, and then we'll share the result with you in just a few seconds. Great. All right, let's see who we have so far joining us. Wow, great. I see there are a lot of social enterprises, business owners, and individuals. Right on. This session is for you, so I'm glad that we have a lot of social enterprise joining and impact business joining us today. We also have quite a few academic institution, capacity development provider. We have some banks as well, development finance institution, government agency. That's a great group of people we have today. Thank you so much. The next question we have for you, if we can have the poll launch on your screen. You can see the poll. Great, thank you. So just very quickly, just to see if you can just select the option that best describes your organization. We want to know if you're actually calling in from an organization that's a local one based in Thailand. Some of you are joining in from somewhere in the region, and there's some organizations that are international organizations. If you could please let us know, so the panelists also get a sense of who we have in the room. And we'll also share the results again in just a few seconds. Great. So let's see who we have. Awesome, great. So this session is actually going to be a lot about Thailand and Bangkok. So I'm glad to see there are a lot of local organizations joining. We also have like almost 33% of international organization and about 13% of regional organization. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us into this little poll session. So today, as we start, I want to just take a look at the agenda for today. And let me first introduce myself. My name is Phai Chai. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a regional chapter manager for ANDE, East and Southeast Asia chapter. I'm also here joined by my colleague, Kun Sudara, who's the general manager from SE Thailand. And she and I will be emceeing and moderating the session today. Kun Sudara, would you like to walk us through the agenda for today?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Kun Phai, for the great introduction. Today, the first thing we'll be doing is the report launch of the State of Social Enterprise in Thailand, which is led by SE Thailand and TDRI in partnership with the British Council, the ESCAP, and SE UK. The second report to be launched today is led by ANDE and is supported by the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth as part of the Global Inclusive Growth Partnership Initiative to address income and information inequality through the lens of inclusive growth. This Bangkok Snapshot is part of a global ecosystem snapshot initiative that ANDE conducted. Followed by the two report launches, we will have a panel discussion addressing the challenges of entrepreneurship for impact. We will be joined by 4 distinguished speakers who will give us insight through the lens of entrepreneur, policymaker, ecosystem builder, and financier. And we will be followed by a closing remarks from our esteemed guest joining us all the way from the UK. So to start off today's session, may I introduce Tristan Ace, Global Partnership Lead Social Enterprise Program from British Council, who is joining us from Hong Kong today. Tristan, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Da and Phai, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar. Having a quick look through the attendees, it's great to see some old friends who have joined us today, as well as many people who have not had a chance to meet before. So thanks very much for taking the time out of your afternoon to be with us for this, these two report launches. I sit here today wearing two hats. Firstly, as Dar said, the Global Partnerships Lead for the British Council's Social Enterprise Programme, but also as co-chair of the ANDE East Asia Steering Committee. So I'm really delighted that we have come together today to launch these two complementary pieces of research, both of which are designed to strengthen Thailand's entrepreneurial ecosystem. So it's fantastic, really fantastic that we have such a huge range of ecosystem builders that have come together for today's event. The State of Social Enterprise Landscape in Thailand is a collaboration between the British Council, Social Enterprise Thailand, the Thai Development Research Institute, or TDRI, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for the Asia Pacific, Social Enterprise UK, and this report was supported by HSBC. It's also part of a global social enterprise landscape series, of which we've done a lot of surveys across particularly across the ASEAN region. And I noticed one of our research partners from Sri Lanka, Lanka Social Ventures, has joined us for today's launch. So welcome to LSV colleagues, and we look forward to being able to share and compare results across the region as well. The second report that we're launching today is the ANDE Bangkok Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Snapshot, which is a project supported by the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, and that's through its Global Inclusive Growth Partnership Initiative. I think both reports would not have been possible without all of the support from social entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, leaders of small and growing businesses, or SGBs, across Thailand and across Bangkok. So thanks very much for everyone, and hopefully many of you participated in both of these pieces of research. So this is really an opportunity for you to hear how your research, how your inputs have contributed to these really important pieces of these two very important pieces of research. So the two reports focus on different aspects of the impact economy, although they are, of course, very complementary. And some of the insights will be different. But one thing that was the same for both reports was the need to develop a more collaborative and better connected impact entrepreneurship ecosystem in Thailand. And I think that the launch event today is perhaps the first step in responding to that recommendation, with the coming together of the two research teams in order to launch the research today. And hopefully there'll be more opportunities in the coming months and years to really build and strengthen the connection between different parts of the ecosystem. We are also delighted to have the endorsement of government with the forward for the State of Social Enterprise in Thailand, contributed by Mr. Jurin Laksan Alwisit, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Commerce Minister of Thailand, but is also the Chairman of the National Social Enterprise Promotion Committee. And as noted by the Deputy Prime Minister in his forward, with the passage into law of the Thai Social Enterprise Promotion Act in March 2019, I think these two reports are really timely, as they offer valuable insights designed to inform ecosystem builders as they really capitalize on the opportunities afforded by this new law, the opportunity to really use the law to strengthen the broader social and impact entrepreneurial ecosystem to support both social enterprises and the broader group of small and growing businesses in Thailand as well. So, like in many parts of the region, we're seeing SGBs, social enterprises, rise to the intense challenges that we are facing, particularly as a result of the pandemic. And we have some findings from our social enterprise report around the impact of COVID-19, but we see that they are really providing some of the solutions to these challenges as well, in healthcare, in education, and they are providing support and employment and entrepreneurial opportunity to some of the most vulnerable groups in our societies, particularly with an emphasis on including women and gender as well. But I won't go into any more of the headline findings, and we would love now to go into much more detail and hear from hear presentations of the two reports from our two presenters. The first of which is Dr. Bunrara Sumano, or Yui, as we know her affectionately, who is the Senior Research Fellow at the Thai Development Research Institute, or TDRI. So Dr. Yui, I'm going to hand the floor to you to present the findings for the Thai Social Enterprise Landscape Report.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Hi. Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Tristan. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Bunrara, and today I'm going to present about the results from our study, the state of social enterprise in Thailand. This study, we have three objectives. We want to develop an understanding about the current situation of social enterprises in Thailand. And we also would like to build a database of social enterprises and to study the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on social enterprises in Thailand. And ultimately, we would like to deliver a set of evidence-driven policy recommendations for government agencies and stakeholders. This study, we use methodology. On the qualitative side, we conducted 19 key informant interviews with government agencies and leading players in the social enterprise ecosystem in Thailand. And on the quantitative side, we conducted online survey during April to July 2020, so at the early stage of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just to give you a brief overview about Thailand's context, the early social enterprises in Thailand can be dated back in 1970s. The most famous ones are under the royal projects, such as Doi Kham and Doi Tung. And some of you who have been to Thailand may have heard about the cabbages and condoms restaurants, as well as birds and bees hotels, which are businesses that were developed by the Population and Community Development Association. And in the late 1990s, we also see quite a lot of social enterprises growing during this time. Some of the most renowned ones include Chao Phraya Aphai Phubet Hospital, Greenet Cooperative, and also Dairy Home. And the first official promotional policy for social enterprises in Thailand was introduced in 2010. And after that, we've got the Thai Social Enterprise Promotion Board and also the Thai Social Enterprise Office, which was meant to be the registrar of social enterprise in Thailand. And subsequently, we got around 103 social enterprises registered by the board. And finally, we got the Social Enterprise Promotion Act introduced in May 2019. And under this new law, we got three main mechanisms that work towards the promotion of social enterprise in Thailand. The first one is the Social Enterprise Promotion Committee. The second one is the Office of Social Enterprise Promotion, or OSEP, which replaced TCO. And the last one is the Social Enterprise Promotion Fund, which was meant to be the source of loan for registered social enterprise. And the new law also set out criteria for registration of SEs as well. And some of the key criteria is that you need to be a juristic person under Thai laws. You can be a limited company, or cooperative, or community enterprise. And then you must have a social purpose. And if you are registering as a profit sharing social enterprise, then no less than half of your income must come from trading. And also, if you are registered as profit sharing social enterprise, no less than 70% of your profit must be reinvested for social purpose. So if you want to share your profit with shareholders or owners, you can do so, but no more than 30%. And registered social enterprises will be entitled to 4 types of benefits under this new law. The first one is the right to receive grants or loans from the Social Enterprise Promotion Fund. The second one is the preferential treatment in government procurement. Note that these first 2 benefits still need the bylaws to laid out the rules and how these 2 benefits are going to be delivered. The third one, tax benefit, is already in place, but this benefit is only applicable to the non-profit sharing social enterprises. And the last one is the right to raise funds from the public without having to change from being limited company to public limited company, and without having to apply for the permission from the Securities and Exchange Commission. And you can see in this slide our partner in crime, and I have to go through very quickly, so I'm just going to present about the result of this study. So we use SurveyMonkey to collect data during April to July 2020, and in total we've got 202 responses, a lot of 2 and 0. After eliminating the incomplete response and duplicate response, we try to identify social enterprise by using our own criteria. And this criteria is from the 3 questions that we ask in the survey. So for the respondents who answered that they are, the main purpose of their business is for profit only, and those who answered that they only receive grants or donations only, and those who report to be sharing the profit with owners and shareholders only will be eliminated. So in the end, we've got 146 respondents who meet the criteria of being social enterprises in our study. And we found that social enterprise in Thailand are often young, as you can see from the bar chart. More than 50% of our samples were established in the past decade. So during the same time that the master plan for social enterprise development was introduced. And around 1/3 of social enterprises in our survey are operating on a smaller than provincial level. This suggests that a number of social enterprises in Thailand are area-based. And social enterprise in Thailand are more likely to be based in Bangkok. You can see that those who operate in the international scale, national scale and provincial scales tend to be in Bangkok. And those social enterprise who are based in Bangkok also tend to be small in terms of size of employment. And we found that the majority of our survey SEs, especially those who are relatively young, which means registered in the past 10 years, are registered in the form of a limited company, followed by cooperative and foundations or association. And we also have 25 registered SE in our survey. And we also found that there are many respondents, many organizations who meet our criteria of being SE, also intend to register as a social enterprise under the new law in the future. And more than 1/3 of them tend to plan to register within 1 year. And I'm happy to report that 35% of social enterprises in Thailand are being led by women. This is a higher ratio than the national ratio and the global ratio. At the national level, it's 24%, and the global level is 13%. So that's quite good news. And contrary to our traditional view that energy and technology is a male dominant sector, we found a number of women-led SE in this sector as well. And the majority of SE led by women tend to be small, operating with less than 10 workers. And more than half of social enterprises in Thailand have leaders who are under 44 years old, which are around the mid-career professionals age. And leaders of SE also tend to be highly educated. And social enterprises in Thailand are creating more jobs for women, both in full-time and part-time position. You see the going upward trends in both full-time and part-time employment. And you might also notice that the gap between women employment and total employment in the part-time positions is smaller than the full-time position, which suggests that women tend to be hired in part-time position more than full-time. And social enterprises in Thailand are also employing diverse groups of people, including the marginalized, for example, young people, women and single mothers, and the elderly. And most social enterprises do not have volunteers. And those who have volunteers tend to be relatively young, which means they just started in the past 10 years. In terms of financial support, the top 3 forms of financial support that SE in Thailand are receiving are grants from corporate, funding from family or friends, and personal income from another job. The last 2 kind of suggest that formal source of income such as commercial bank may not be available to social enterprises right now. And you can also see from the pie chart that SE which receive grants from corporate tend to be in the mid-career kind of age. So between 25 to 44 years old, I mean the age of CEO. And in terms of non-financial support, the top 3 forms are training, mentorship, and incubation. And for those who receive trainings, you can see that there is no social enterprise with later age below 24 who report to have received trainings. This might be because this group of CEOs may just graduated from course or from university, which already have quite relatively up-to-date skills to train your entrepreneurs. So there might be not dry need to go into training then. Okay. And more than half of SEs earn all of their revenue through trading. And you can also see the proportion of women-led SEs that generate 100% of their revenue from business operation. is higher than that of the mainland SE. And social enterprises in Thailand are viable businesses as well. We have 42% of our sample who reported they made profit last year, and their plan to use the profit include to invest in growth and development activities, building reserves and rewards to their staff. And almost half of social enterprises conduct their own social impact assessment. And sadly, another half have not assessed impact at all. So this is an important gap to demonstrate the impact of social enterprises. And among those who conduct the self-assessment, they tend to be relatively young as well. Okay. So the obstacle faced by social enterprises in Thailand tend to be access to finance and the lack of understanding or awareness about social enterprise among general public and consumers. In terms of effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we found that SE are quite resilient. They reported they saw no need to lay off staff during the COVID-19 pandemic, and only 19 SE out of 146 reported they had to lay off staff. So we have to note that this survey was conducted at the early stage of the pandemic though. So to conclude, SEs in Thailand are operating in agricultural, health and education sectors, and they tend to be relatively young, so around 10 years old, at the same time period in which the government start introducing promotional policies. They tend to be based in Bangkok, and they tend to be in the form of limited company, and they often employ young people. And they are more often led by women than business more widely, and they receive non-financial support in the form of training. They do not tend to hire volunteers or unpaid staff. They also serve a range of vulnerable individuals, and they are quite resilient, and they still need support. Actually, in our survey, there's another important finding. We found that a majority of our samples report that they received no government support during the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of recommendation, first, we think it's very important to promote the awareness and understanding of social enterprise among general public in Thailand. This can be done in various forms. For example, a marketplace for SE to sell their products or offer their service. And also in the form of TV show like Win-Win War that kind of gather people with great idea and turn and guide them into being an effective social enterprise. Number two, we think it might be the benefit of a more tailored made policy if the OSEP can link the database with other relevant agencies, particularly those registrar of the cooperatives and community enterprise. Third one is we think we could push for the need to demonstrate the impact and contribution of social enterprises in Thailand. So OSEP might help by developing a self-assessment for impact assessment toolkit that is less costly than the one available right now in Thailand. And the fourth one is, although the law just recently was recently introduced, there are some gaps that we heard from the KII that should be revising to make the laws more easily to implement it. And also we need to implement the other two benefits, particularly Social Enterprise Promotion Fund. We saw that the social enterprises in our survey lack of access to finance as the main obstacle of them. And we think this fund can be the promising source of fund for them. So perhaps there could be a tax benefit for individuals or corporates who donate into the fund so that this fund can be expanded and be able to offer to SEs more. So that's it from my side. And now joining us from Washington, DC, she's the research analyst for ANDE, and she will be sharing with us insights from the Bangkok Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Snapshot. Please welcome Vicky Hoon.
Thank you. Yes, as mentioned, I'm joining from DC, and I'm very happy to be joining. I'm ANDE's research analyst, and I work on pretty much all of our ecosystem snapshots. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll go through a quick agenda on my end. I'll start a little bit by sharing about the Snapshots project generally for those who aren't familiar, and then go through some key insights, the data behind those insights, and then finally some takeaways from this research. So for those who aren't familiar, snapshots are meant to give a static representation of the landscape at a specific point in time and place, offering a sample of the landscape that is representative of the larger ecosystem. And as opposed to the previous report, we focus on the organizations that support entrepreneurs in a given geography. If we can just go back. Sorry. And while we work really hard to include as many players as possible, we acknowledge that it's not an exhaustive list of players. We're kind of at the mercy of whoever responds to our survey or has information available online. But we do try to focus on getting a good sample. We collect data on all types of entrepreneur support organizations, from capacity development providers and investors to media and sector organizations. So a high-level overview of how we produce these snapshots. We start by identifying as many ecosystem players as possible to target through our outreach. The survey is for organizations who support entrepreneurs to complete in order to both give us information about their services, specifically for that geography, as well as insights into the inner workings of the ecosystem that an outsider might not get. So once we've identified who we're going to survey, we design the survey, and the snapshots collect consistent information across all geographies. However, we always add custom questions for each geography. So for example, if you're familiar with our Myanmar snapshot, you've seen that we had information on infrastructure, which was of particular interest there. And for this snapshot, we focused on financial constraints for entrepreneurs in Bangkok, as well as some COVID-19 data, which was relevant. After we've collected some data, we gather feedback and then continue to collect data, making adjustments based on that feedback. We do the stakeholder meeting about halfway through the data collection process so that we have time to course correct if needed. And then finally, we analyze, write the report, and publish and launch. So a very quick thank you to anyone who contributed to this snapshot throughout any part of the process. We really appreciate any input, and it's extremely valuable. So where can you find this information? Our website is ecosystems.andeglobal.org. And it recently got a little bit of a makeover. So this snapshot looks a little different from our previous snapshots, but not too different. So we now have two tabs: the highlights page, which is kind of the landing page, and it gives a few pieces of information from the report. Again, just a few highlights. And on this tab, you'll find the full PDF report available for download. You'll also find the English version and a Thai version. We also added a new feature of being able to download the anonymized data. So this is basically just like downloading the directory tab, which is all information that you could potentially find online. just in an Excel sheet. So there's no personal contact information, which is what we mean by anonymized. There's also no opinion-based questions included, just about services and anything that you could find on an organization's website. Moving on to the next slide, the value add of the website versus the PDF. So the PDF report kind of gives a lot of detail about the insights and the data, and it's obviously static compared to the directory tab on the website, where you can actually look through all the organizations included in the snapshot, and then you can filter and sort by various categories, including organization type, investment instrument, sector of focus, and stage of focus. And then you can click on any of the organizations and find out more about their services specific to Bangkok or whatever the location is. And then we always link out to their service or to their website as well. So that's kind of the dynamic part of the website. So who will you find in the directory for this snapshot? For this snapshot, we identified 267 organizations supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses in Bangkok. The largest organization type represented in the sample was capacity development providers, which made up nearly a quarter of the sample, followed by investors and government agencies. The majority of these were locally based organizations in Thailand. In terms of services, the majority were stage agnostic, meaning they supported pretty much any stage of business except for mature stage businesses. Very few organizations indicated that they supported businesses at that stage versus idea, early, or growth stage. Similarly, most organizations are sector agnostic as well. However, if they did have a sector of focus, the most common were agriculture, health, energy, and information and communication technology. And then finally, nearly half of organizations focus some or all of their programming exclusively on tech-enabled businesses. So this doesn't necessarily mean they only work with businesses in the ICT sector, but rather those businesses that would have a tech vertical in any given sector. We used to ask about specific verticals such as ag tech or clean tech. However, it became clear that most of these verticals were tech related. So it just became more interesting to know who's only working with tech-enabled businesses. So what did we learn through these respondents and our research? For each snapshot, we pull challenges and opportunities from the data, which lead us to the recommendations or key takeaways, which I'll be presenting at the end. So on the challenges and opportunities, we found the top challenges to be a lack of early stage investment funding, lack of collaboration among ecosystem actors, barriers to accessing talent, and challenges around creating and implementing updated government policies that directly affect entrepreneurs and small businesses. On the opportunity side, there is an opening for financial providers to use alternative collateral instruments and equity investments to fill the funding gap, easing the access to information on regional markets to directly address some of the challenges around entrepreneurs' ability to branch out beyond the domestic market, taking advantage of the supply of management talent and skilled workers, as well as the changing policy and regulatory environment. So as you can probably see, there are some contradictory or paradoxical findings on this slide, and I'm going to dig into that a bit more in the upcoming slides. So now I'm going to dive into the data a bit, which led us to some of these challenges and opportunities, but I'm not going to cover every little thing in the report. So I certainly encourage you to download the full report and give it a read. But starting with our first finding of a lack of early stage investment funding, 45% of respondents, so these were support organizations, ranked this as a top challenge for the ecosystem. We actually supplemented this data with data from the Future of Work survey, which is delivered from or by the OECD, the World Bank, and Facebook. And as you can see, they found that only 6% of the over 1,000 Thai SMEs surveyed are financed through venture capital. The rest seem to be finance through alternative financing means such as personal finance, loans, etc. Moving on to the next slide, and the next most cited challenge for the ecosystem, lack of collaboration, was one of those paradoxical findings because it was both a top challenge and a top improvement for the ecosystem. So based on this data and conversations with local players, we found that this points to the idea that while collaboration is improving, the gap was so wide to begin with that the improvements still leave a gap to be addressed. So it's definitely positive that it's one of the biggest improvements in the ecosystem, but definitely more than a third of respondents are still noticing that as a challenge. Now to get into some of the more seemingly contradictory findings, starting with access to talent. So this was listed by nearly a third of respondents as a major challenge. However, a 2019 NPAC Startup Ecosystem Report ranked Bangkok as #1 globally for human capital. So how is it possible that both of these findings are true? What we found was that, oh, sorry, if you can go back. I'm still on this slide, thank you. So what we found was that larger organizations and businesses are actually able to pick up a lot of the local talent and drive up the price, making it difficult for small businesses and startups to tap into this supply. So even though there is talent available, startups are kind of being squeezed out of the market. And then moving on to the last of our more paradoxical findings, we have the challenge of creating and implementing updated government policies, which was cited by respondents as a top challenge. However, the World Bank ranked Thailand as 21st on the Ease of Doing Business report in 2020, which was due to policies that specifically focus on startups being implemented. So why did our respondents rank this as a challenge? Based on the interviews that we conducted, we found that this was mostly due to the long-term view of the policy changes versus the Ease of Doing Business report, which takes into account more recent findings. So with an inconsistent set of priorities and a lack of agreement on the best course of action long-term, we think that's kind of where the discrepancy was in that finding. And then if we can go to the next slide, now I'm going to get into the financial constraints analysis, which was part of the bank or unique to the Bangkok snapshot, as I mentioned previously, compared to some of our other snapshots. So the top 5 barriers identified by intermediaries and support organizations that entrepreneurs face when attempting to secure financing are a lack of business acumen or experience, limited financing options, lack of scalable business models, the market being too small or growing too slowly, and the regulatory environment. So some of these certainly overlap with what I've just previously covered, but I think it's important to note that there are both demand and supply side constraints to accessing finance. So if we can go back, I'm sorry. One important note from the intermediary perspective was that Thai entrepreneurs that they've met tend to have a scope that is a bit too small for the investment community, meaning they are focused too much on the domestic market and kind of aren't thinking big enough. On the other hand, interviewees also mentioned the idea of Thai doubt, being that Thai investors have a preference for foreign companies over local businesses, so kind of issues on both sides there. When moving on to the next slide, when asked what type of support could potentially improve access to finance, respondents shared the following as broad categories of support. So improvement in mentorship and knowledge sharing, enhancing and increasing investor pools, more government support, et cetera. So the most popular was improving mentorship and knowledge sharing, which we felt could be an attempt to directly address the mindset of local entrepreneurs and giving them relevant examples through mentorship of organizations or businesses that have expanded beyond the Thai market to help them think bigger with additional information about how to expand beyond that market. Moving on to finally go through, so based on all the data that we collected, which is beyond what was included in this presentation and is found in our report if you're interested. These are the recommendations that we took away based on our research. And so starting with the need to improve access to talent for entrepreneurs and startups, possibly through policy incentives and partnering with academic institutions to reach new talent first. The next was to create a defined agenda for the ecosystem to improve collaboration by getting everyone on the same page in terms of priorities for the ecosystem and what will most benefit entrepreneurs in the near, medium, and long term. This is a pretty general recommendation, obviously, but hopefully through gatherings like this and getting more and more players together to have these conversations, that becomes more obvious with an agenda kind of emerging from those conversations. And then focusing on scaling up startups is directly coming from interviews and responses to the survey about how to make startups more appealing to investors. So a lot of respondents talked about a lack of vision beyond the Thai market. So directly addressing that when providing capacity development or education to entrepreneurs, along with giving them guidance of how to find information about going beyond the domestic market is something respondents felt should definitely be a priority. And then finally, addressing the support gaps related to access to finance by developing a strong network of financial support providers and kind of reaching beyond the Thai market in that sense as well to expose local founders and entrepreneurs with limited experience to more international players, again, kind of expanding their mindset beyond the local market. So that concludes the overview of key findings from our report. Thank you so much for listening. I think we are taking questions in the chat box I see, or the Q&A box. So I'll let Phi or someone take over.
Thank you very much, Khun Bunwara and Vicky, for your presentation. Thank you very much, Khun Bunwara and Vicky, for your presentation. So maybe I pick up two questions for the first presentation first, and maybe Phi, you can help with the second presentation. So Khun Bunwara, the question to you, the first question is from TZO database. They mentioned around 1,000 SEs, and what is the current estimated count based on the research findings? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay, thank you, Kunda. That's a very, very good question, and the one which we have been trying to figure out as well. The master plan for social enterprise promotion, which was introduced 10 years ago, have the estimate of the national, the social enterprises in Thailand. And at that time, because the law on social enterprise was not introduced yet, they count all the cooperatives and community enterprise, as well as foundations and NGOs into social enterprises category. And therefore we have quite a lot of number. But since now we have the Social Enterprise Promotion Act, and in this law, they set out criteria for being a social enterprise. So for those who fit into these criteria and already registered, at present, there are 141 registered SE. And in this study, we use a different criteria to identify social enterprise, and therefore we got a larger number. So what I'm trying to say is it depends on how you define social enterprise, really. We can then make the estimation on that definition.
Yes. Great. Thank you, Kun Wara. So for Vicky, because in the interest of time, I think I'm just going to pick 2 questions I'm going to ask you, and I'll let you try to answer that. So the first question is from Kun Chris. How are other markets outside Thailand expanding early stage investor pools or increasing financing option for early stage ventures? The other one is regarding collaboration from Julia Wu. What kind of collaboration is lack of in the ecosystem?
Thanks, Dai. So for the first question, how are other markets expanding investor pools? I think as it relates to Thailand, one of the biggest pieces of feedback or insights that we got from respondents was about easing restrictions. Oh, sorry. I just got the message that I should speak up. So easing regulations and making it easier for investors to come, especially international investors, to come into the local market. That's kind of one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we heard from. But I think that actually is a very good question, and or in the sense of a research question. I obviously work on our research team, so I think that would be interesting to kind of get some case studies from other countries and see what they're doing and how applicable that is to other geographies. And then in terms of what kind of collaboration is lacking in the ecosystem, I would say, again, based on the feedback that we got, a lack of kind of consistency in updating policies. So like I mentioned, the World Bank ranked Thailand really highly on the ease of doing business report. However, this was like, it's generally based a lot on the newest policies and doesn't as much take into consideration over the long term. And I think that's where the disconnect is for a lot of our respondents is over time, there's a lot of contradictory policies being implemented, all with the same intention, which is of course to improve the ecosystem and the ability for small businesses to grow, but with kind of some fluctuating ways of sorting that out. So that is what I would say about those.
So thank you both presenters for sharing their insights. And it seems like we've had some great opportunities. We've made progress in terms of the SE legislation. And from our report, we can also see that there are some room for entrepreneur support organization to work on upskill talent, helping entrepreneurs to build the business acumen, and hopefully more collaboration in the ecosystem. So all of you who are here, we hope that in some ways or the other, we'll be able to synergize more with you guys. So in the interest of time, let me move to the next part of this session. I'd like to welcome our panelists to join us on your video camera. We have 4 distinguished speakers today. The first one, Professor Kitipong Urapi Pathanapong from Baker and McKenzie. The second, Kun Iti Barugas from PFAN. Kun Amrit Jaranpan from Impact Collective. And Kun Tamonwan Wiroj Chayan from Morlu, who's actually the only entrepreneur here joining us on the panel today.
Hi, good evening.
Great, welcome all of you. So to start off, I'd like to invite you to give a brief introduction about your work and how your work is relating to small and growing business or social enterprise. and share a little bit more about your programming. You'll each have 1 minute elevator pitch in this part. So let's start with Professor Kittipong. Please, Professor.
Good afternoon. My name is Kittipong. I am Chairman of Baker McKenzie, going to retire in this coming June. I was appointed to be the drafting committee of the SE Act in Thailand. As the Deputy National Reform Committee. And with Dr. Kopsak, we are able to push the SE to be passed by the parliament, even though we not get 100% what we want. And I also serving as the chairman of Chiwamit Social Enterprise, which is doing the work for happy living journey. I mean, we try to educate the people about how to do a living wills, what is the palliative care, what is the hospice, and we want to change the law that people have the right, not the right to kill themselves, but have the right to give up the treatment. So that is the work we have done. We have set up about 3 years now. We have the non-profit SE. It was certified by the SE board. And for the last 3 years, we raised a fund about 21 million baht from our investor. And we able to do some work. And after the 3 years, we have cash over of 3 million baht. So it proven that if we doing SE in the right way, it will be a good thing. And then I think I also serving as a member of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, going to be retired this coming month. But I think the ESG is one of the point that the SE can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kun Iti, please.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Iti Varugis. I'm the Thailand Country Coordinator of the Private Financing Advisory Network. We're kind of obsessed by this molecule, 1 carbon, 2 oxygen, and its impact on the climate. So what we do is we help companies that have climate relevant startups and innovations to access funding. It's one of the issues that the report talks about for social enterprises. It's something that we've been doing for 15 years, beginning first with renewable energy, but now dealing with things like circular economy, agriculture, water sources, tourism, a whole range of things related to climate change. So I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon and to be part of this panel.
Thank you, Kun Iti. Kun Aim Amarik, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aim, and I got the most very tech, colorful slide. Do apologize, but if you must have seen me in the past in many reincarnations. I was a founder of Thailand's first co-working space, Haba, in 2012, and about 2015, we launched a technology and media conference called TechSauce. All that was going well, but at this particular conference, I'm here to represent the Impact Collective, which is something that happened during COVID, when co-working spaces were shut and conferences were banned from being organized. Normally, there'll be a show of 20,000 people every mid-year. I was invited by a few friends to really try to accelerate and support 100 social enterprises from across Asia Pacific, but have never met any of my colleagues or any of the entrepreneurs in person. So everything coming out from our living room. And through that experience, it was actually going back full circle, because I started my career in 2010 at Change Fusion, running Thailand's first social enterprise incubator. So gone from entrepreneur to ecosystem and a capacity builder, and now also to a VC fund and angel investor. And lastly, been very proud and excited to have been part of the financial constraints analysis for the Bangkok Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Snapshot with Kunfai and the team. And I hope you enjoy the report that we came up with.
Thank you, Kun Aim. So last but not least, our super women entrepreneur, Kun Tamonwan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Am. I'm a second generation of a garment manufacturer based in Bangkok, Thailand. And I'm also a co-founder of Molu. So Molu, we have a mission to make a circular economy a reality. So by making it a reality, we have to start with something. So what Molu start with is the fashion industry, which is the industry that I'm living in. Okay, in order to get a fabric, we have to go through so many processes from like farming, spinning, weaving, bleaching, dyeing, producing, or even logistic, and all the process emits carbon footprint. So with Molu, we are like work as a middleman to curate the high quality surplus fabric from manufacturer, and we resell it online on the platform. So in this picture, in this presentation, you can see that we are like a bridge to connect between the garment manufacturer and those who need it. So for us, we have 3 models. We sell the fabric as is for the designer or brand. We also make a finished product for organization and company. And we also make a B2C, like selling our own collection as well from time to time. So all of this is the beginning of Molu. And we start everything with the grant from NIA with 50,000 Thai baht. And that's our journey. That is my journey for Molu.
Thank you so much, all the panelists, for your great introduction. So for the next round, we'll be discussing the current status of small grown businesses and social enterprises in Thailand. All the panelists will have 4 minutes each. The first question is for Kun Am Chamonwan, our only entrepreneur here. So one of the interesting findings from the Social Enterprise Landscape Survey is on the challenges faced by entrepreneurs, be it the cash flow, the access to finance, and the awareness of the general public and consumers, especially when it comes to social enterprises. What is your opinion on this? I mean, do you face the same challenges? How is the situation with the current complexity of COVID-19? How have you been dealing with it? Any lesson learned to share with us all? Please, Kunal.
Yes, of course. We have like facing all the challenge that you mentioned. And for me to start a business is really difficult. But to start a business with an impact, even more difficult. So for Molu, we are very lucky that we have based our business model that the revenue and the impact is going in tandem. So yes, and it's happened to work out for us luckily. And we have grown like number of customers during the past few years. And with our B2B model, so we have like producing a lot for the organization and company, both in Thailand and international. But since COVID came, yes, we do have like problem with it as well, because all the B2B like lockdown. So which is understandable, but like the budget of the organization have been squeezing, so we could not get the same amounts of like order as same as pre-COVID. So by that, we have changed, adjust about like our business model a little bit. Like instead of pursuit for only B2B, we also explore more on the B2C part. So we have actually produced our own collection, which is like, I have a sample here, Molu social distance, which you can see that like our logo is like separated and go along with the face mask. We also collaborate with other brands to making the personal protective suit, like on the back here, it's called Zero Space. So we grow number of the B2C customer. So we grow about 10x for our B2C part. And for the fabric part, luckily that last year, our our fabric part also growing very fast because many of the customer or the brand and designer doesn't want to go to the local market, and they are more comfortable to go with the online platform which we have. So yeah, that would help us a lot for last year. And so for the situation with the COVID, after we produce our own product for the face mask, especially, first we produce only like 500 pieces, but after people using it, we get more repurchase and also a lot of like corporate reorder for their organization. So we end up selling more than 10,000 pieces of the face mask. For Molu, like we didn't have only one business model, luckily. So for us, with the situation that new for all, so we have like adapt and adjust ourselves a lot. And by the question that you asked, like if we have the problem with the COVID at the beginning, yes, but at the end of the year, we found out that our business model for the other parts of the business still work out. And after COVID, for like the third quarter, the end of the third quarter last year, our B2B customer came back and continue to order the fabric from us.
Great. Thank you so much, Kun Am. It sounds like the struggle is real with COVID-19, and Molu was actually able to pivot fast at the situation. But the impact of COVID-19 does not only affect entrepreneurs. From the data that ANDE collected, it shows that actually over 73% of intermediaries have had to adjust their support delivery program, and some had to actually develop the new content for their program services altogether as well. So Kun Iti, if I could pass the mic to you, would you please share about how your organizations have done so far in order to adapt during COVID-19, and if maybe there are some possibilities and opportunities that PFAN is doing to support entrepreneurs that are affected by COVID-19?
So just as we heard from Molu, we too had to change not what we did, but how we did it. So the work that we do, a lot of it is about helping entrepreneurs to de-risk their business model and then present that model to the right sort of investor. So pre-COVID, that was all done on in-person consultation. Post-COVID, everything had to be done remotely. So that transition was not as difficult as we imagined. In fact, to some degrees, being able to work on platforms like Zoom made us able to do more in the available time. One of the, but on the other hand, finding entrepreneurs who qualified for our program, that became a little bit more difficult. And so shifting from physical forms of engagement to digital forms is an ongoing process, but I would say that about 7 months later, we were fairly good at that. So last year, we actually helped raise $103 million for about 50 companies across Asia. So, clearly the digital process is something that will work, and it's now, I think, going to be baked into our DNA. In respect to the early days of COVID, we immediately realized that the entrepreneurs that we support would, their first threat was cash. How do they stay cash positive? Forget about profits, forget about building the balance sheet. Do you have enough cash to pay your suppliers, to pay to pay your employees, and so on. So we ran within the first 3 weeks of COVID lockdowns, we started to run programs to coach our current cohort of entrepreneurs through the process of managing cash and just to stay afloat. Then we realized that some of the graduates of our program also needed that kind of help. So we added that too as a support, a specific post-COVID or COVID support program to increase the support for people who even actually already graduated from our program, but with whom we still have strong relationships. So in summary, we had to change 3 or 4 things. We had to change how we engage with our current cohort. We had to change how we recruit new cohorts into our program. And then we had to provide specific point solution aid to people in the program that was relevant to the challenges of running a business during a period of, during a pandemic and during lockdowns. So yeah, quite a lot of change, and one that I would say didn't really hamper us and perhaps gave us some new capabilities that we can amplify our support programs because we're now more used to these digital tools.
Thank you, Kun Iti. I want to just maybe dig a little deeper into the part that you mentioned about how to help business to stay cash positive and have longer runway, especially during COVID-19. So I want to turn the floor to Kun Amrit, Kun Aim. Financial constraints actually is listed as a major obstacle in both of our reports, as you may have heard. So from the data, it seems that entrepreneurs mentioned that they are actually not familiar with financier networks, and some of the newer businesses also stated that they have sort of a lack of talent and skills in terms of refining business models. So I want to know if you could share, what do you think businesses struggle with in terms of access to financial resources? And if you could also give us a little bit of a brief picture of the financial landscape of impact businesses, SE, SGBs in Thailand at the moment.
Sure, thank you. This is a topic close to my heart because we're talking about this 10 years on. When the first time I got into this industry, there was some major problem. We were running many incubation programs and a lot of people came with their hearts out, but there was nobody there to catch them. All the ideas to find early stage philanthropic capital grants. I think like Vicky has said, things have gotten much better, but as the ecosystem is also, the needs and the expectations of the entrepreneurs that we serve are also increasing. So I think to kind of zoom in, BlackRock's latest report on sustainability asset under management, $25 trillion, 425 funds saying that they're going to double the amount of capital they're putting into the space. It's the money is there. We're literally printing money. If you're in the cryptocurrency space, capital is just not going where we want it to go. Now, I think when you said about older businesses, this was something that I felt I saw firsthand 10 years ago, which is impact companies were in social enterprise, we're in our own little bubble. And then all the techies and the expats were in different bubbles. And having been a bit of a ecosystem bridge myself, gone into the tech world, came back, I'm starting to see that the lines are being blurred. We have teams that are Thai and American, Thai and Japanese. Now for older entrepreneurs to say it's hard to make acquaintances or know financial networks, I would say that's a highly solvable problem. I never knew any investors when I started my co-working space, and all I did was just run the space and people showed up and we got to know them and we went to pitch them, and You know, after a while, Texas, our conferences reach 1,500 investors annually. So it's really about getting out of that bubble and comfort zone and going out there and say like, so what do I have that would be interesting to talk to different financiers? And I think there was a mention earlier of, you know, are we always talking about improving investment readiness? What about investor readiness? I think it's all about trying to, Eddie pointed out in the chat, you know, the missing middle is entrepreneurs need to understand the business model of their investors, because once they take the money, those investors need to provide a return to somebody. At the same time, investors need to understand how to groom and support early stage companies and what it would take for them to turn the companies they invest in to grow really big. As for newer businesses that don't have a business model, highly solvable problem again. I have a startup that came to my co-working space, Seekster. They were doing on-demand home cleaning services. Met literally in a hackathon. They were interning in my co-working space. And from those young entrepreneurs who just came fresh out of college, they were able to learn from the workshops, learn from the competitions, learn from other mentors, join accelerators and programs. So the content, the resources support, it's just not evenly distributed. And one of the things that I found that with Impact Collective, we had 300 applicants from across the world. We had 1,000 people join the community. Only Young Happy and local alike, the two stalwarts, very famous social entrepreneurs in Thailand actually signed up. So it's really about, for me, you know, a lot of people mention it. People still don't understand social enterprise. We still have a lot of work to do to promote and get all these resources really in the hands of people, but also getting people comfortable to say, well, it's COVID, there's no accelerator, I'm just going to sign up for something randomly in Korea and things are going to take care of themselves.
Thank you so much, Kun Aim, for your very great insight. The next question will be for Professor Kittipong. We would like to ask, what is your opinion on the policy and regulation concerning the promotion of small growing businesses and also social enterprises in Thailand, especially after the enactment of the Social Enterprise Promotion Act? What is the expectation versus reality, given also your involvement as the leading person during the drafting of the act, and also now that you're currently leading one of the well-known SEs here in Thailand?
Thank you. I think the law is still have to issue what you call ministerial regulation in order to fully implement it. Again, I think this law, we do not get what we expected to have fully, especially the funding, which is important for the SE. And I think we have to take with this law. And this law, if I may, I think at least it's better than nothing. As you know that there are the person who fully understand SE is have very little understand the SE issue, even though the member of the parliament. So this law may not be 100% that we can achieve the SE, but at least I think we can start with it. And I think the policy I think is important that the government have to understand when they decided to split two types of SE, what is non-profit and what is with profit distribution. And the benefit they try to give, the tax benefit is different, namely like the non-profit, they give tax exempted status, and also the investor. On the other hand, for the profit seeking, they only give the investment expenses by the investor, but by both most of it by the corporate investor, which I think it's not the thing they should do, because from the survey I saw, individual people may want to support SE. That's number one. So I think they need to change the law. Okay. Number two, I think for the SE, they still want to make some profit. And with this difference of two types of it, it may be difficult for the profit-seeking SE can survive, notwithstanding of other issues like fundings and the HR and know-how. So I think they need to change the rules of that. And I think the one thing I would like to believe that the ESG, as I mentioned to you earlier, that we can have a big corporation who are part of the ESG, that they can fund the SE, both in terms of investment, in terms of HR, in terms of the outsourcing, mentoring, and part of the supply chain to the listed company. That can answer Kun Amarit's question that it's very difficult for the SE to raise a fund. Even today, the SEC granted a permission for SE to raise a fund, but raising the fund from private individual person may be a small scale. But if you're talking about a VC, for example, a new startup, they didn't look at the startup and SE together. The government looked at the startup as different issue, which I think they should put together all the startup and SE together for the new entrepreneurship. I think that's, in my view, if you ask me, there's still a lot of things to do, but it's important that we need to educate a lot of people to be part of this ecosystem. I think with the new generation, younger generation, we have good intention to do good thing for the country. I think it's important that we have to work together as a partnership. I give example, one of the thing we work together with the new investor is the Carnation, when they do sort of like sharing the profit when they send the red go to the temple. I think that's one we working together with them. This is the young people, and they have a lot of passion to do the good thing for the country. So if we have a partnership a lot with all the new startup, that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Professor Kittipong. So your insight to have more corporate partnership, the partnership between big corporates and that would help support SEs, and also how we can actually bridge the startup ecosystem, which might be more mature to engage SEs into that ecosystem too. So may I also address the questions from the next round to you first, to Professor Kittipong. So for the last round, our question for every panelist is what we can do to make the ecosystem better for impact entrepreneurship in Thailand, make it more vibrant, and also I mean, whatever you think would help we build a more inclusive ecosystem for small growing businesses and also social enterprises. So Professor Kittipong, what could be done at the policy level to promote more impact entrepreneurship?
Thank you. I think the partnership between big corporations and governments and the SE is important to do a partnership, number one. each of them can learn from each other. Number two, I think the funding is issue. We need to amend or amend the law, giving some incentives to the big corporation, which they have one, but there are so many rules there. The government must be openly to change the rule, must simplify for people to get benefit from the tax in terms of investor. In the meantime, simplify for the SE to do the thing. And I think the third one is that apart from the financial part, I think the knowledge from business, HR, IT, IP is important, and it's difficult for SE to have that knowledge. Again, with the big corporation to assist the program, to be mentor, to be incubator is important. And of course, it comes with certain incentive to those who are providing to the SE. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the younger people, the entrepreneurship by the younger startup is important as well. I think if we try to make it simple and easy for them to help, or even for them to start up, I think it's important too.
So I did hear you mention about partnership between corporates and SEs, sort of more simplified funding processes for them, and also in terms of knowledge, building those. So I want to turn this question on to Kun Amarit to share a little bit from an impact investor perspective here. For you, what do you think should be done at the policy level to engage with financiers or investors in Thailand in order to channel their resources for social entrepreneurs? And if you could just mention, if you think there are any roles that public sector could play in bridging the gap of investment readiness here, and any advice that you may have for entrepreneurs in order to make themselves more attractive.
Sure, thank you so much, Kap. And just kind of following from Professor Kittipong, I think every ecosystem, if you've seen a lot of research, is driven by the public sector and governments making a lot of the necessary investments, the railroads in which we all are able to create innovations from. Now, I think one of the challenges is and that's why it's reflected in Vicky's assessment, which is long-term, the policy has been inconsistent. We have governments that last less than 4 years and as an extreme focus on the short term. And with that inconsistency, and many times, we don't have technologists running technology policy, it begs the question is, are we solving the right problem and the speed in which we need to solve? And then compare that to more progressive governments like Singapore. At least for an example, is all tech companies in Thailand reincorporated in Singapore, sadly, just because of the more favorable tax and corporation policies. And a lot of companies want to be in Thailand. They want to pay Thai taxes, but it's just not been very forthcoming. So for social enterprise policies, like taxes, great. It's great to have deductions or tax waivers, but many emerging new companies don't pay any taxes. They're gonna make losses for quite some time to invest. So that kind of understanding, what do people actually need? I think for financiers, it's quite simple. If you want to raise money, whether it's for low yield or high yield, you need to understand the funds and the angel investors' motivations. And they're always going to think about how much, if I invest today, how much of this is from. Some of it I get back in terms of karma points and impact assessment that allows me to go and raise more funds and allows me to communicate to my stakeholders. But I still need to return some capital. And some of those ways is exit opportunities. or making it easier for me to set up funds. We don't have a lot of VCs set up locally. We don't have a lot of people investing in funds. We don't have a lot of family offices. We don't have a lot of endowment funds. We don't have a lot of government money like Temasek or GIC putting money into the ecosystem. Can we mandate companies to set aside more of their investments to be ESG and follow SDGs, more procurement, more involvement, more support for SGBs and SEs, and encourage new funds to set up, not just by the conglomerates in the stock exchange, but by more agile, nimble, privately held companies, family-owned companies that are all disrupted by COVID and need to do innovation. And how do we match the two together, financiers and great entrepreneurs who, on the other hand, our job, my job within Pack Collective and the likes is to help create quality deal flow, create the entrepreneurs that would go on to scale their business outside the country. Behind the success of every great entrepreneur is a very strong board of directors, board of advisors, great investors, and there's a safety net and a whole ecosystem helping these entrepreneurs succeed. We don't have a lot of accelerators, incubators, and angel investor network to begin with. I can barely think at this moment right now, if I'm looking specifically for social enterprise, who would I go to? How do we get more consultants, more supporters, more and be subsidized so that they're getting high quality, big four quality accounting services and legal services without paying an arm and a leg. Grants and loan schemes, we're seeing a lot of that, but it takes forever to apply for and many hoops. Investor matching with corporations and funds, and even also businesses to businesses deal facilitation or business to government. How do we get customers for the companies that we like to support? Once they have a lot of customers, that is the best source of funding. They grow, become really big, they become really attractive for investors. And hopefully we will actually fix the social enterprise ecosystem for good for the next decade.
Thank you so much, Kun Aim. It sounds like we have a lot to do. You've mentioned a lot of great things, from the public sector being a little bit more consistent with the longer term policy, to the speed of the support that they're providing, some clarity on tax incentive, exit opportunities, the simpler ways to set up new funds. I could go on. So thank you for that. And now I actually would like to ask Kun Iti as well. So Kun Aim touched a little bit on some of the ways that financiers could do to work with entrepreneurs, and from the public sector point. Kun Iti, both reports that we have actually seem to align that there's a lack of business acumen and also lack of scalable refined models, as we discussed. So what do you think, from your opinion, is a missing recipe here? And what could entrepreneur support organizations like PFAN help to upskill, build the talent, and increase more pipeline for more investment-ready businesses in Thailand?
So just to answer that question with some experience from our organization. So if we go back to 15 years ago, the developer of a project to generate solar power had extreme difficulty trying to get funding. And yet today, you can read routinely of $200 million investments or more in solar power generation. So what changed? What changed in the middle, I think, was that the people developing the solar energy projects got better at presenting their financials to the investing community, and the investing community got better at understanding the risks and pricing the risks of each project. If we go beyond that now to say something that has, let's say, an enterprise that would have a public health impact by reducing particulate matter in the air. Now, clearly there's a monetizable benefit from that, but actually who earns that benefit? It doesn't appeal to an investor when this sort of proposition is presented, because the investor isn't going to earn the benefit. So Kunaim talked about, and several people have talked about, the emerging weight of ESG criteria in companies. And I think that that is a possible bridge between people producing, entrepreneurs producing public benefits or environmental benefits or social benefits, and organizations who are mainly for profit, but whose stakeholders are saying to them, we want to see you, to see what you're doing to improve the spaces around you. So there is clearly, at least there is a pathway to constructing a bridge. I think ESG is the place that it would be possible, but it requires education on the part of the project developer to present the ESG case, and on the part of the investor to understand how this ESG contributes to their ongoing enterprise. Clearly there's, that framework exists, and with a year from now, I expect that this conversation would be very different.
Thank you very much, Kun Iti. You have, your insight is very valuable. So we need to, there are a lot of work from both the side of the entrepreneurs and also the investors when you end your discussion just now. The last question for this panel will be addressed to Kun Thamonwan Nam. As an entrepreneur, listening to all the policymaker and the intermediaries discussing about how they could support you, what do you think is still lacking to make business like yours grow, and what should be done going forwards? What do you think are opportunities for entrepreneurs or for intermediaries to support impact entrepreneurship? Please.
Okay, so after hearing everyone, I would think of, like, for us as a very small company, I mentioned earlier that we are starting from a small grant, like 50,000 Thai baht from the NIA. That grant for us can help us start, but after that, it won't help us to grow. So for Molu, we considering ourselves as like a state of like an early stage growing. So for me, I would say, if the grant or investor have a different stage to match with each business stage, that would help a lot. I think that for Molu, we are looking for the support, like from an investor who interested on the social impact as well, because we also facing different type of investor talking to us, which we have very strong commitment on what we want to do. Like our mission for 5 years is like to prevent the carbon footprint up to 1 million kilogram of carbon, which like we really focus on that. And we looking more for like the network and collaboration. For example, luckily, like last year, with the SE Thailand collaboration with the government saving bank or Thanakan Omsin to like give a soft loan for the SE. Well, this helped us a lot, especially for this certain time for like the new wave is coming for the COVID. It's also give us more potential to grow. And in order to get this soft loan, we have to be positive on our like financial. So for Molu, we think that this soft loan not only give us more flexibility to continue, but it also make make us feel like our hard work is pay off, because one of the more work is that we always work on our financial or accounting. Like we have the proper accounting system since the day one, so we can track everything, and it's like make us feel like what we did legally is pay off, things like that. So that's what I think. And another thing from other panelists about social enterprise fund, we are really agree on that. If it happened, then it should help a lot of SE to grow and to start the business. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kun Chamonwan, Kun Ann, for sharing your thoughts on that. Sounds like we do have some great suggestions from the panelists, and also sounds like there's some optimistic, positive initiative that's already in play as well. I think we do have a little bit of time for one, maybe two questions. So I'll maybe just select one question and ask from the Q&A box. This question here is from Kun Chris and is addressed to Impact Collective, Kun Aim, and PFAN, Kun Iti. The question is, investors can be primarily concerned with investment exits, hence not deploying capital in an industry that is not liquid. So for Impact Collective and PFAN, how do you view exits for social enterprises? And what are, sorry, one question's gone.
Yeah, sorry, I just kind of answered it and then hit return just as you were asking it.
Sorry, let me find a question quickly, no problem. Bear with me for 1 second. Right, okay. So the question is, how do you view exits for social enterprises, and what are the future next steps that needs to be addressed? Looks like Kun Iti already answered. So Kun Aim, would you like to address this question?
Sure. I mean, there's always a view that we can always build a long-term, high-growth dividend business, and that's perfectly fine and normal. But obviously, the incentives for some of the smartest minds in the business and the technology world is that, okay, we've got some of these SE structures, but if I'm going to hold some equity, I'm going to come and be an early employee, where can I not just get impact and the sustainable returns and environmental, social returns, but can the future of social enterprise also have a lot of models that create financial returns? We want to incentivize people to feel that, there is the traditional model that we'll keep doing, but some of the best investors that I talk to are telling me that, if we really want to push the envelope to get the best people, we got to show them that there is a impact stock exchange, or there is a SPAC that would buy up impact companies and then help them grow even further. There's a lot of potential funders down the line that would be able to create a social enterprise or a brand or a product or services that spans Asia, the continent. And I feel that having this view always that, there's opportunities for exit, if we raise funding, we're going to have to treat social enterprise differently than a business. Always puts social entrepreneurship at a disadvantage as a lucrative investment opportunity in a career. I hope that through what Iti is doing, I think we see a lot of that in climate tech and clean tech and energy, that you can create a lot of impact and also a lot of massive return. And figuring out how do we find more of those business models and make people feel that this is a great career is one of the things that I haven't been able to do for the past 10 years.
Yeah, true.
Thank you, Kun Aim. Another question, I think we just have time for a very short question. Oh, sorry, no, I still no. So let me just mention that there are a couple of questions, really great questions on the Q&A box. We'll make sure we compile all of that, and we'll make sure that we get the answer for you when we send it out, together with the follow-up email in a couple of days with all the links to the reports, the link to the presentations today, information and context about the panelists as well. So actually, thank you very, very much for all the panelists who joined us today, Professor Kittipong, Kun Iri, Kun Amarit, and Kun Tamonwan. So you shared great insight, and we hope that this joint collaboration we have today will kind of be a stepping stone for us to help to identify and develop a stronger network of financial support providers, support organization, SE and impact businesses combined for the Thai market as well. Great. So I'll pass on the next part to Kuda.
Okay, thank you, Kun Phai. So we have already come to the finishing of today's session, and we feel very honored to welcome Baroness Glynis Thornton, joining us all the way from the UK. Baroness is a member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom and the former chair of Social Enterprise UK. She has been a strong advocate for social enterprise, firstly in the UK and latterly internationally, particularly in the Southeast Asian region. Baroness delivered the keynote address at the ASEAN +3 Conference on Social Enterprise, which was hosted by the government of Thailand in 2018. And we wanted to invite her again to join us today to share her reflections on the Thai entrepreneurship ecosystem. Please, Baroness.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope you can all hear me, which is of course how everybody starts their, their calls across the world. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be able to hear this most inspiring webinar today. And I thank you very much indeed for inviting me to join you. It's a lovely start to my day because, of course, it is the beginning of the day of a grey, rather damp, rather cold lockdown London. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. And it's also to see people that I have, well, to virtually see people that I have met when I've been coming to some of your ASEAN conferences and events over the last, I think it's probably about 10 years. And also people who've been to visit us here in London through the British Council. As you know, I'm patron of Social Enterprise UK, which I founded, and I'm also actually a parliamentary ambassador here in the British Parliament for the British Council. It was fascinating to hear the presentations, to hear Vicky's presentation, and to also listen to your very distinguished panel. I'm always so impressed at the energy that the ASEAN region and friends in Thailand have got and the achievements that you've made, because and I've said this several times, you always leapfrog us in the United Kingdom. I mean, you managed to achieve in a year what it took us sort of 5 years to do. And that's very, very encouraging indeed. I mean, for example, to be able to have someone of the stature of Professor Kittipong supporting the drafting of your national legal framework is just, I think, enormously valuable. And of course, we've all been through a very challenging and continue to go through the very challenging time of the pandemic. And because I'm a shadow health minister in the House of Lords, this has been my life for the last 10 months, is actually dealing with this in the British Parliament. I think that there are certain things that you have discussed today, which I think will bear fruit for the future and are very important. I think you have not lost sight of the importance of paying attention to government policy. And I think you've also not lost sight of the importance of the role of your umbrella organizations, the strength of having a voice which is particularly for social enterprise in your countries and your region. And I think you've also shown resilience and innovation that social enterprises have brought to this period of the pandemic, and also what the future holds in terms of the green agenda and all of the innovation that's going to be needed for us as a world to recover from this. And you've not lost sight of the importance of investment and the development of investment tools to take you forward. So my reflections are that the pandemic has offered you challenges and also opportunities. You have recognize the importance of partnerships, cooperations, the role of young people, and the importance of the capacity of the sector for investment. So I just want to leave you with those thoughts, that I am not complacent on your behalf, but I am actually extremely optimistic about what the future holds for you and the impressive progress you have made. Can I say thank you to all the people who sponsored this? And can I just also say how much I long for the day when we can actually all be in a room together again to exchange our experiences and discuss where we've got to and what still needs doing to promote this important social enterprise world that we are all in. Thank you very much.
Oh, Phi, I think you're on mute, Phi.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? So thank you so much, Baroness Glynis, for joining us and sharing some great comments today. Also to all the speakers and all the people that are attending. And before we actually part today, I just want to mention some of the hope and next steps for our collaboration today. We still hope that in the near future, we're going to be able to host another launch of this report in Thai, together with SE Thailand again, and all of the partners joining in today. Finger crossed that will happen soon. And hope that today will be, the starting point for all the collaboration that bring all of us closer from the impact ecosystem, social enterprises, tech entrepreneurs, some corporates that are interested in ESG, and universities that are building new skill and talent for the impact ecosystem. And I think next is we want to make sure that we have done this event well. We want to see how we could actually do the event better. So we have a link here. If you could actually bring up your phone, help us very, very quickly. It will just take you maximum 2 minutes, I promise. Just to go on the bit.ly/th report event survey to give us some feedback and comments and anything you want to see in the future event that we're hoping to host together. That would be fantastic. And my partner in crime for today, thanking her for being here with me. Anything you want to add?
Thank you, Khun Phai. No.
Okay. Yes. So if you could help with the survey, and then hopefully we'll be able to share the links to all of the reports that we mentioned today in the follow-up email. You also have the QR code here that you could have access to our reports. And with that, I think we'll just close the event for today. Thank you very much once again, all of the attendees joining. We've had someone joining from France, from the UK, from the US, all over the place in Southeast Asia. And most important, every one of you who are joining from Thailand as well. It's our pleasure to be here for you today. And I'm speaking for everyone who's sitting together social distancingly in this room who are making both of the reports happen. Thank you once again and hope to see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Baroness. Hope to see you soon next time.
Absolutely. I hope so.